And here we are. Okay. I was on the road a couple minutes late. So we made it through verse 4 yesterday. And I was awfully distracted. But once again, there's a great message there that all of you need to remember is that God doesn't leave us, but we often leave him. You have left your first love. You didn't lose it. You didn't forget. You left. There's just no way around that, really. None of us just, I forget. There was this thing I used to do every morning. And now we leave. We get tired. We quit. Something happens. We make a bad choice. And then we usually compound it with more bad choices. So Abraham goes back to Bethel. That's what he does. He remedies his problem by going back to the place where God last spoke to him, back to the place where he made that altar. So that's what we need to do, is we need to remember when we wonder where God is, go back to where he last was, and there he'll be. It's not rocket science. It's just often we have to swallow our pride to be willing to go back. So in verse 5 it says, Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell there together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's flock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock, the Canaanites and the Perizzites that then dwelt in the land. So Abram said to Lot, Please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, then I'll go to the left. Lot lifted his eyes, and he saw the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. So we see what's going on. There is the land, and there wasn't enough room for the two of them. And we see really a model solution by Abraham. He says, hey, whatever way you want it, you go that way, and I'll go the other way. It's hard for us today to esteem others more highly than we do ourselves, to bear with others and defer to others and give others preference. But that's what we see Abraham doing. And God will bless Abraham, and God will care for Abraham. And even though Lot chose to pitch his tent towards Sodom, is kind of a way you can translate it. I think the Authorized King James, that's the way it's said. It's the way to, he pitches his tent towards Sodom. He saw what looked on the outside to be prosperous, to be wise, to be, this is the way to do it. This is going to be fruitful. And Abram said, you know what? You can have what you want, and I will go the other way, and God will provide for me. Quite often, we are wanting to serve our own needs. We want to do what's best for us, rather than thinking about the interest of others. Quite often, we will only agree to things if it benefits us or it's acceptable to meet our terms. Whereas, God will provide. And I think that's something that's practical and helpful within the Christian community these days, is really for us to think, if I just defer to my brethren, and go figure, if they do the same thing, then they're going to be deferring to you. But we have that mentality, that heart, that attitude. God will provide. God will care for us. God will take care of our needs. And we don't need to worry about pitching our tents towards Sodom. I mean, even in that is just an attitude of wanting to do things like the world and seek the world. And God doesn't do things in worldly ways. He's not wanting us to be seeking after what's best for us like the world does. In fact, we're supposed to be laying down our lives, laying down our rights, laying down our preferences and our desires for the sake of others. And Abraham's going to come to Lot's rescue more than once, whether it's coming down to save him in chapter 14 or praying and interceding for him before God does destroy Sodom. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that's going to happen because of Lot's choices. But Abraham continues just to bear with his brother, his nephew, right? And he's going to bend over backwards to help this guy. It's something we need to see, I think, in the church. Two passages that jump to mind. One of which I think, I don't know, I quote it quite often, maybe because it's just important for the church to hear these days, but in Galatians chapter 6, it says, do not be deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. And it's talking about the bad stuff, but it's also, right? We often quote that verse kind of warning people. You better watch out, because whatever you sow, you're going to reap it. And guess what? That warning is true. Absolutely true. But there's a blessing there too. Listen, don't underestimate the Lord. Don't be deceived. God will not be mocked, i.e., when Rick Hendrickson gets to heaven, God's not going to owe him a dime because we can't outgive God. When Arla or Steve or I, right, we're never going to get to heaven and feel shorted. God's not going to be mocked. We're never going to talk about the great deeds we did that went unappreciated, unnoticed, or unblessed. Because it says in verse 9, let us not grow weary. This is Galatians 6. Let us not grow weary. Let's not get tired while doing good. For in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. We're going to receive for that which we have done if we don't give up and quit, because I wanted to see the fruit now. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let's do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. And I think there's something really important there that really in the early church, that was the other text. I don't think I'll flip there, but in Acts chapter 2, we see the early church selling off all they have and giving to one another. And that was really the model. The biblical model, more so, is the church caring for the church. It's the church bending over backwards to support the needs of the church, supporting one another, caring for one another. You see, I don't think it's the only reason, but when those on the outside look at the way that we care for those who are on the inside, that's supposed to draw them in. And though it is good and needed that we go outside and we care for the sick and we care for the poor and the homeless, we have to understand something that I guess I was just thinking about recently is that in the early church, right, when we read the book of Acts, especially the first half of the book of Acts, first third, whatever, everyone's Jewish, right? When they were caring for widows, when they were caring for the homeless, they were Jewish widows. They were Jewish homeless people. And maybe they hadn't believed on Jesus yet, but the idea was they were caring for their own. And that drew people in. They weren't out there trying to draw in every homeless person, every widow, every orphan they could find. But there was a care for people within the church. So again, this is not saying you don't do those things, but what it's saying is that there should be a high emphasis, Galatians 6, right, where it says, especially those of the household of faith. And so as Abraham looks to the best interest of Lot, and as I look to the best interest of Arla, and as someone else looks at the best interest of another, when we keep helping each other, there's that synergy that takes place where 1 + 1 = 3. And that church can thrive and prosper as the members of the body of Christ identify with the body part they were designed to be, and they go out and they function and they are fruitful because of what they do. So I could go on and on. We'll continue on with what's going to go on with Lot. But it's a good note, that we are to give preference to one another, that we are to submit and surrender to one another. And the more, whether it's in a marriage, this is a great marriage advice, or it's in just the church, if I continually am pouring myself for others, but I'm surrounded by people who are doing the same, it's this beautiful place of mutual surrender where our needs are being met, and we are all able to give those things which we have in abundance. Some of us have abundances of time. Some of us have skills that are helpful to those who don't have skills, but people have skills that are helpful to us. And as we give of the things that we have, we can receive the things of which we lack. And we see the church functioning as she always was designed to, but something that is very lost in the day and age we live. An age of selfishness and self-seeking and self-centeredness. So, guys, give. Esteem others and their preferences higher than your own, and do it for the gospel's sake. Do it knowing that it's not just to do it, it's doing it to show this world the love of Jesus Christ being shared between his children. So, there you guys go. I will see many of you tomorrow morning, and if not, I will see you guys on Monday. So, God bless you, take care, and until then.